Sub-Saharan Africa, coming from you late night. We are pushing this one out, and we are going to get chapters 6 and 7, section 3, before spring break. This way, spring break can be a vacation for all of us, and we don't have to worry about what's going on in the world for this class, just for our own purposes, getting this thing through. So, Sub-Saharan Africa, check out the little link. Every time you see the little link, go ahead and check those out. They're active links. And here we go, part 1. Like usual, going to talk about the same order. And what you saw in this chapter is that is sort of a continuation. This is keeping on the same continent from North Africa, Southwest Asia. But North Africa, we have African continent, 54 different countries. Our biggest region geographically, and in terms of amount of countries so far. Because there's 54 countries on the continent of Africa, in Africa, and we take away that of what is of North Africa, we're left with 46 countries. 54 minus 8 would be 46. Math, and it's late. They're probably going to be, this one, I'm telling you right now, probably going to be some mistakes in this one. Not that probably doesn't inspire much confidence saying that in minute 1, but man, we are coming from beyond midnight here, up late in Sub-Saharan Africa, getting this one done so we could have a happy spring break for the students. So here we are. We already talked about North Africa. We know that this is a predominantly Muslim region, or Islamic region. A lot of Muslim folks. We know that this area relatively dry. We talked about that, so we're not going to get too bogged down with that. There's a political map, so we won't be talking about the physical geography until just yet. Move on for that one, but you can see here a lot more countries. We'll talk about their origins and things like that and how they interact with each other. But a lot of ground to cover. Equator running through here as well, which will, again, shape into our segue, physical geography. And this is an elevational map, so what we're looking at is the elevation here. We see that some lowland area here, that's going to be the Congo Basin. That comes up. I just spoiled it. That was a surprise. It's going to be on the next slide. So exciting. And then we have here, this was the Sahara Desert. I hope you remember that. And then remember we have the Sahel. I'm just getting ahead of myself. That's all on the next slide. But and you can see here a little bit more of a highland area compared to that of other places. Obviously, the lowest areas, that of the coast, at or near sea level, of course, because it's meeting land meeting ocean there. See a political map of Africa there. We see our physical map here in regards to elevation, which does help us. It helps us understand some things in positioning this when we get started. But now the landforms, because I was excited about that. We already covered the Sahara Desert in the last chapter. We know about the Sahara Desert and in its size, and then it's expanding through desertification. When the desert's expanding, encroaching into that Sahel region. I'm not going to spoil it. We have Sahel on another slide to talk about that. So we have the Sahara and the Sahel, this area, it's growing a little bit further in terms of the dryness of that particular region. Obviously a hot region too. And we'll talk about why that's happening. Congo River Basin, the Congo River Basin, we saw that was a pretty low point in terms of the continent, some gulfs here, but we have the Atlantic Ocean, the Indian Ocean, that Red Sea that we talked about. Great Rift Valley is a geographical feature that we want to talk about when we're talking about East Africa, Ethiopia Highlands, country there, Ethiopia, birthplace of modern humans. This is where some origins are traced to in Ethiopia, one of the few places to become colonized in Africa. So interesting things there. We have the Horn of Africa. We'll talk about what that means for its geography as well. I'm probably blocking this as you're trying to take some notes. Probably saying, get out of the way. Mozambique Channel, between Mozambique, now I might be off camera. Mozambique Channel, separating the country of Mozambique and Madagascar. It's an island. We know about that through the movie. Kalahari Desert, perhaps you've heard of that. And the Namib Desert, and that country there being Namibia. So in this way, we have a lot of physical geographic features that we're going to talk about. But at the same time, they're going to be in those countries that they're so cleverly named after. And we'll probably have an easy time parsing out what's what and where And of course, again, this is going to be dictated with a climate map superimposed on it. We can see that because of the elevation, and we'll know a little bit about the climatic forces, precipitation, and things like that, and why that's influencing it. So here we go. Climate and vegetation. Tropical rainforest, right here in the heart of Africa, that Congo-Kinshasa, but that's a whole separate ordeal. Well, I guess we should talk about it right now. So there's two Congos in Africa. Republic of the Congo, right in here. This is not a good map to look at because it's got some stuff superimposed on it. Republic of the Congo, excuse me, and that we refer to them by their capitals. So we'll say Congo Brazzaville, and that's one Congo. Then we have Democratic Republic of the Congo, and that is another Congo. That's the Congo we talked about in Lumumba, also known as Zaire, also known as Congo-Kinshasa. And so that's that larger one. That's the heart of the Congo River Basin right there, heart of the rainforest there, and we'll talk about that. But you can see here desert, semi-desert and steppe, and that's that Sahel region. We know that that's not quite desert, but areas that are still relatively inhospitable. We have pastoralists there that are nomadic people raising cattle, not much vegetation in places like this. And we know this because of some climatic forces that are going to be coming up. But you can see a little bit of Mediterranean down here. There's a little bit of a wine country in South Africa. And so there's, now we know what Mediterranean is because we studied the Mediterranean. We studied it in Western United States. We studied it in North Africa. We studied it in South Europe. Now we're studying it in Southern Africa. This is the country of South Africa. This is the region of Southern Africa. Know the difference. All right, looks good. We'll keep going. Physical geography. It's big. Okay, that's it's just a fact. It's the second largest continent of all the continents. First being Asia. However, so it's the second largest, but it's actually the size of the United States and Europe combined. We would know that a fourth of the continent of Africa is the Sahara Desert. Interesting. So we're just throwing out the fun facts tonight. The Sahel, okay, we talked about this. So we have the Sahara Desert, picture it, Sahara Desert, then the Sahel, which is that border, that transitional zone from what we saw was rainforest to Sahara Desert, and the Sahel is a transitional zone in between. Grassy transition zone. Didn't even read from the slide, this is my words. 5 main rivers in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Zambezi, the Nile, the Niger, the Congo, and the Orange. Orange being in South Africa, Congo being in, you guessed it, the Congo. Zambezi down in Southeast Africa. The Nile, we've already talked about it, running from the Sudan area up through Egypt, but South Sudan as well, which is a country in this region. And the Niger and the country of Niger. Oh, again, these run through a couple different countries, but notably in those places. Ooh, a lot of text on this one. Climate and vegetation. Most of Sub-Saharan Africa has a tropical climate. Okay, check, we got that. We know that there's still tropical climate, got a lot of desert, but still tropical climate. The Intertropical Convergence Zone, ITCZ, sound familiar? It should. We talked about it in South America. When we talked about middle and South America, middle central South America region. This was that, okay, to put it into its formalities, band of atmospheric currents that circle the globe, roughly at the equator, okay? Warm winds converge from the north and south and push air upward, causing a lot of rainfall. So that's exactly, here we're gonna shake things up. We're gonna go backwards. And so what we have the equator running through here. We have a little country here called Equatorial Guinea. You guessed it, because it's on the equator. Equator runs through here. You have this is gonna shake people up, but this is some demonstration here. Roll up the sleeves a little. So we have the equator, we have those winds, trade winds, and the winds that are coming from the equator. They're coming through and they're pushing, but the precipitation is landing in a band in and along the equator. And at certain times when those winds shift, depending on the season, you push that rainfall up or down a little bit from the equator. And so their seasons are reversed. Their winter is our summers are their winters. And in different periods of time, some rainfall will get up into here, some rainfall will get down into there. And that's why you see these areas to be somewhat tropical, but not as wet and tropical as this band that runs through there. Now that was a demonstration. Horn of Africa, triangular Somali peninsula of northeastern Africa, into the Red Sea near the Arabian Peninsula. This area remains quite dry because of wind patterns, the Horn of Africa. The environment, that takes care of physical geography already. Carbon sequestration, we already talked about this because of Brazil and other countries filled with people in South Central America that have been removing trees through deforestation processes. So it's a removal and storage of carbon that's taken from the atmosphere, largely due to deforestation. We had slash and burn agriculture that we talked about in Brazil and other places. Deforestation in this sub-region, Sub-Saharan Africa, in this region of the book, chapter 7, driven by a demand for farmland because Africa is growing rapidly. We remember a total fertility rate of 5, which is larger than what we've seen so far. So these places are expanding rapidly in urban areas and thus requiring farmland to get food to these people, and also fuel wood because oil, while there is oil in Africa and quite a bit of it depending on where you are, it's still quite expensive for the people of Africa to be able to afford financially. So fuel wood and forming of charcoal is still the number one use for a lot of these people, and so that requires the destruction of the natural forests. And again, these are rainforest areas that are protected in a lot of places, and so there's this awkward relationship of trying to preserve and then also trying to be able to be of subsistence for human life. So Nigeria, third, is in terms of third for deforestation, and fourth, respectively. Third is Nigeria. Fourth, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Congo-Kinshasa, the bigger Congo, home of the Congo River Basin. So Nigeria third, and Congo-Kinshasa fourth for largest in the world of greenhouse gas emissions as a result of deforestation. So this is happening right here in the heart of Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. Food production. So in Maputo, Mozambique, 1.2 million people shifting from charcoal to cassava-based ethanol. So you see this, we saw this happening in Brazil, where they were moving off of different properties and going to sugarcane processed ethanol. In the United States, you have corn-based ethanol. Here, cassava-based, which is more widely available than Africa. And so this shift is coming. It's an industry where money can be made for people there. And also this shift for agroforestry. It's economically useful crops of trees are intertwined and used in conjunction with the usual cash crops that have been growing there. So you're implementing some trees that are good for the environment, just simply because they're trees and they do good for the environment, intermixing some crops and having a little bit of the best of both worlds, if you will. Subsistence farming is still farming more for more private use for that of the home and the family and the farm itself. Smaller farming, that's still sort of the wide practice and the norm, although factory farming that has cropped up in different regions, is still obviously here, but subsistence farming is still widely practiced. That leaves people kind of vulnerable. If you have a bad harvest, if you have some problems with the climate, you have drought or you have too much rain or something, and you have a loss, not only did you wound that family financially because they were dependent upon the agriculture, perhaps selling off some small things, because this is, again, very local. But you're also having a hunger problem now in these particular families because they're producing it for their own consumption. Water, food and water. Water, while rainfall can be plentiful, because we saw that through my demonstration in my hands, much of the region is seasonally dry. We kind of know that. Remember, we saw the Sahara, we saw the Sahel, we know what's going on. We know that those areas also pretty dry seasonally, but then those winds shift and it takes a little bit of water in each direction for a little bit of the year. But water shortages then exist in the region, and they're only expected to worsen because of climate change and because of rapid urbanization and a lot of humans obviously populating the continent. New groundwater has been discovered in different parts of Africa. These areas they've happened to discover them in are pretty sparsely populated areas, not the ideal areas where we'd want to discover sort of natural water underneath the surface. So again, it doesn't mean exactly the problem's fixed, as the book says. but it certainly it will be useful. Which leads us to, again, we should mention there's contamination. There's contamination because, again, human-environment interactions, so some of this water that they found won't be even useful. So again, that's why it's good, caveat or asterisk or something. It's good, not great, because we still have some other problems happening. Cape Town, South Africa. If you've been watching the news, you might not watch the news because it's depressing or sad or boring, or you might live under a rock. You might not want to waste your precious time watching the news and knowing what's going on in the world, but you should. Day zero, that's a term being kicked around, day zero. What does that mean? Well, day zero is a time that they put on the city of Cape Town, South Africa, largest city in the country of South Africa, that they'll run out of water. Just going to simply run out of water. Millions of people running out of water because there's a drought-stricken area. So they're going to run out of water. Now, through conservation efforts and rationing of water, they've been able to continue to push that date. That date was going to be coming up, 90 days or so, and then it pushed, and then it pushed again. And so they're pushed a few months from now, and the hope will be is that we get the rains in June that are due for that region, and we get an adequate amount, and the aquifer, which is only at 24% right now of capacity, we hope that fills up a bit, and that they're reprieved of the situation, and things are sort of at ease. But we know with rapid urbanization and population growth that this may be fixed for now, but it's just simply a band-aid on a larger wound. So this is a critical issue in Cape Town, in South Africa, in Southern Africa, Africa as a whole, and a lot of other places around the world. We know that there are places in the United States, the Flint, Michigan water crisis. We know that one of the larger municipalities facing a lead crisis are places like Pittsburgh, not far from my place back home, and other places that are facing not just lead, but other problems with their water quality. Places in Oklahoma as well, influencing different kinds of people, different peoples that have become vulnerable to these types of issues that just humans rely on for human health, human life. Obviously need food and water to live. So sort of one of those, couple of those main things that we need to move on. Global climate change and the wildlife. When we think of Africa, so we did this the last time, what do we think of when we thought of the Middle East? Oops, I said the Middle East. Should have been saying, wait a minute, I caught that. When we say North Africa and Southwest Asia, or the Middle East, global, we had some ideas. We thought it was hot, dry, sand, oil, things like that, conflict. What do we think of when we think of Africa? I probably thought of the Lion King and stuff like that. And so there's talk about wildlife. So 25 to 40%, the IPCC in her panel on climate change did a study and suggests that the species of Africa's national parks are threatened to become endangered, 25 to 40%. That's pretty alarming, and it's quite sad. Why? Well, because of, obviously there's different climatic forces at hand, drought, too much rain, getting hotter, there's other factors here, which we'll talk about. We're not going to oversimplify it that much in just a moment, but we got to sort of go in order here and understand. Also, why? Also because of the environment, bushmeat and poaching. Well, why? Well, when the more farms can fail, that'll have a greater reliance on the local African people to rely on bushmeat and poaching. So bushmeat is going out into the wilderness, the woods, or the bush in this case, and hunting. And so sometimes it's primates, and sometimes it's something more germane, like a deer of some sort, an antelope or something like that. But sometimes it's primates. Sometimes it just simply depends. It simply depends on what's at hand. And we know that bushmeat is problematic in some ways. One from the animal's point of view, in terms of relying on them from a sustainability standpoint, but also some health risks there in terms of diseases jumping to and from just simply the interaction. And poaching. Well, poaching we know is the illegal killing and hunting of some of these protected animals. And why do these things happen? Well, one, sometimes bushmeat to rely on having a food source, poaching to make money, okay? And so these two things in conjunction with climate change having an immediate and impactful, damaging way on the wildlife in Africa. And so Africa's national parks account of 1/3 of all the world's protected lands. And let's talk about the migration through the Masai Mara Reserve. There's a river here, and this is a big, it's like many miles, over 1,000 miles. The book talks about this, didn't make this up from any other sources. It's in the book. Many miles, thousands of miles, 1,000+ miles. I want to say 1,800, but I can't remember if it was miles or kilometers or something, so don't quote me on that. It's right in the book. Look it up. But all we need to know is that there's a migration of quite a distance for animals like wildebeest and zebras and gazelles, antelopes, and things like that to cross the river through the Masai Mara area. And they cross, and usually this river crossing that takes place, usually about 1,000 animals drown a year, which you might sound like, well, that doesn't sound good. Quite dangerous. The river is not easy to cross. These animals are not, I guess they're not made for it. You'd think through some level of evolution and things that through the years that they would somehow find a way. Nevertheless, about 1,000 of them die every year. In 2007, there's a particularly devastating year because while usually 1,000 died, 15,000 died that year because there was a lot of increased rain and the river was quite violent. And they say it may be because of climate change that all that rain and the river was violent. And so now activists and areas, humans in that area have had a little bit heavier hand helping them find safer ways of crossing, steering them away from higher points and things if this were to come up again. So a little bit more of a hands-on approach in helping the animals. Here's the wildebeest there. So interesting stuff. Don't want to leave it on a bad note, but that wraps us up for the first part. 22 minutes, not bad. And we'll be moving on to the human part here coming up, part 2.